wide on the bayou at first light. A mile of glass still water, cypress trees standing in their own black reflections, Spanish moss hanging like the gray hair of something old and listening. Closer now, a wooden dock, splintered at the edges. Tied to it a small houseboat with a steel hull. The paint is gone. Most of it. What is left is rust and a peeling stripe of turquoise. The boat sits low, as if it is tired, or remembering. Closer still, on the cabin floor below deck, a wooden footlocker, brass corners, stiff leather straps, a heavy padlock furred with rust, built before her father was born, inside a folded flag, and 40 small canvas bags, each one labeled with a year, each one heavy. And one more thing, a sealed envelope, addressed in a slanting, careful hand, to whoever finds this. The lid has not been lifted in 40 years, until this morning. She was 19, and she was homeless. No family left, no money in the bank, just a backpack, a duffel bag, and $10 she had been saving in an old Folgers coffee can. With that $10, she bought a rusted houseboat, tied to a forgotten dock, on a backwater inlet in southern Louisiana. The hull leaked. The cabin walls were soft with rot. The marina owner said she would be lucky if it stayed afloat one full month. But what nobody knew, what nobody could have guessed, was that beneath the deck of that old houseboat, hidden in a compartment that had not been opened in 40 years, was something that would change her life forever. And it would change it in a way that reached back through 3 generations, through a woman she had lost, through a man she had never met, and through her own quiet father, who had been carrying a secret the whole time. Before we begin, if stories like this one mean something to you, take a moment and hit subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Her name was Wren Calloway. She was born in a small town in central Mississippi, the kind of place where the nearest creek was muddy and slow, where the nearest river was 40 miles away, where the closest thing to a boat most folks owned was a john boat for fishing in the farm pond behind the feed store. But Wren had been drawing boats since she was old enough to hold a crayon. Her mother Adeline kept every one of them, in a manila folder, in the kitchen drawer, the one beside the silverware. The drawings were crayon at first, then marker, then pencil, crooked masts, stick-figure sailors, boats with sails the size of bedsheets, boats with little square windows and smoke curling from chimneys. By the time Wren was 9, that folder was an inch thick. Adeline was a quiet woman. She wore her hair long. She wore a small silver cross around her neck that she had been given at her own confirmation. She read her Bible at the kitchen table every morning before the sun came up. And every night before Wren went to bed, Adeline would sit on the edge of the bed and pray with her daughter, the same way her own mother had prayed with her. The Bible was bound in soft brown leather. The corners had gone pale from being held. The pages were thin, and the margins were full of small handwritten notes, some of them in pencil, some of them in faded blue ink, some of them in a hand that was older than her mother's, a hand that Wren did not yet know belonged to someone else. Adeline died on a Thursday. A brain aneurysm, the kind that gives no warning at all. On Tuesday, she had been making meatloaf. On Wednesday, she had been folding laundry. On Thursday morning, she collapsed in the front yard while watering the petunias. Wren was 11 years old. She was at school when it happened. The principal came to her classroom and tapped on the door. And Mrs. Burley, her teacher, who had been writing fractions on the board, turned around. And her face changed, right there in front of all the children. And Wren knew, before anyone had said a single word. Her father, Silas Calloway, worked maintenance at the high school. He was a soft-spoken man, with hands that always smelled faintly of motor oil and pine cleaner. He came to school in his work shirt that day, the one with his name stitched in red thread on the chest. He drove her home without speaking. He parked in the driveway. He sat in the truck for a long minute with both hands on the steering wheel. And then he said in a voice that did not sound like his own, "Mama is with the Lord now, sweetheart." And that was the last full sentence Wren remembered her father saying for many years. Because something inside Silas Calloway stopped that Thursday. Not all at once, not in a single moment, but slowly, the way a fire stops, ember by ember, until what is left is gray and cold and waiting for someone to sweep it out. He still showed up to school events. He packed her lunches. He paid the bills. He kept the porch light on. He fixed the kitchen sink when it leaked. He took her to the dentist on her 10th grade picture day. He never raised his voice. He never forgot her birthday. He did, as everyone in town said with a kind of sympathetic resignation, his best, but he was gone. The man who used to whistle in the morning while he made coffee. The man who used to dance with Adeline in the kitchen when a slow song came on the radio. The man who used to tell long, ridiculous stories about a possum he had once tried to keep as a pet when he was 9. That man was gone. What was left was a kind shell, polite, distant, watching the evening news with his eyes pointed at the television, but focused on something only he could see. Wren stopped trying to reach him when she was 13. It hurt less to stop than to keep failing. She kept her mother's Bible under her pillow. She did not read it. She did not pray. But she kept it there, because she could not put it away, and she could not throw it out, and she could not bring herself to open it either. It just sat there, under her pillow, for 8 years. When she was 16, she got a job, a marine supply store, an hour away, just outside of Jackson. She had to ride the city bus to get there. She left her house at 5:30 in the morning. She got home at 7:15 at night. Her father did not ask why she had taken a job an hour away when there were 3 diners in town that would have hired her. He just nodded and signed the work permit and handed it back to her. The store was called Reed's Marine Supply, and the man who owned it was named Macklin Reed. He was in his late 60s, salt and pepper beard, skin tanned to the color of an old penny. He had been a Coast Guard rescue swimmer in his 20s. He had pulled 23 people out of the Gulf of Mexico over the course of 9 years. He did not talk about that. He did not have to. The store smelled like salt water, even though the nearest salt water was 200 miles south. It smelled like rope and rubber and varnish and engine grease. It smelled, Wren thought the very first time she walked in, like a place where something true was happening. Macklin Reed watched her for a week before he said much of anything. She stocked shelves. She memorized the parts catalog. She asked questions when she did not understand something, and she did not ask questions when she did. On the 8th day, he handed her a length of rope. "Splice that," he said. She had never spliced a rope in her life, but she had read about how to do it in one of the catalogs 3 weeks earlier. She did it. It took her 40 minutes. The splice was crooked, but it held. Macklin looked at it. He looked at her. He scratched his beard. "You want to learn this?" he said. Not a question. "Yes, sir." Why? She did not know how to answer, because she did not really know why. Not in words. So she just shrugged and said the only true thing she could think of. "I don't know. I just always have." He nodded, like that was a good enough answer. And then over the next 3 years, Macklin Reed taught her everything. He taught her that ropes are called lines on a boat, and that the names matter, because in an emergency you do not have time to point. He taught her that a boat is a system, and a system can be understood, and anything that can be understood can be fixed. He taught her how to read a tide chart, how to identify a boat by its hull, how to mix marine epoxy until it stayed where you put it. He taught her what a bilge was and what a stuffing box was and why the through-hull fitting was the most important inch on the whole vessel. And he taught her about his brother, Thaddeus Reed, who lived down in Louisiana, who ran a boat repair shop on a bayou outside a town called Houma, who had been fixing boats with his own 2 hands for 35 years. If you ever want to learn from the inside out, Macklin told her once, Thad will teach you. He owes me. Just say the word. Wren saved every dollar she could. She kept it in the old Folgers can, in the back of her closet, behind a shoebox full of letters she had written to her mother and never mailed. By the time she was 18, she had $880. By the time she was 19, she had a little over $1,100. And on her 19th birthday, her father died. It was a Tuesday. February, the kind of day where the sky stays gray all afternoon. She had worked a half shift at the marine supply store. She had ridden the bus home. She had walked up the porch steps. She had pushed open the front door. The television was on. The evening news was playing, the same anchor she had seen on that screen 1,000 times, talking about something that did not matter anymore. Her father was in his recliner. He looked like he was asleep. She knew the moment she saw him that he wasn't. She did not scream. She did not cry. She walked across the living room. She turned off the television. She sat down on the carpet at his feet, and she stayed there for a long time, holding his cold hand, listening to the refrigerator hum in the kitchen, listening to the wind move the wind chime on the front porch, the one her mother had hung up there 16 years before. Heart attack, the medic said. He did not suffer, the medic said. He just stopped, the medic said. The way she had been watching him stop for 8 years. The funeral was small. 3 people from his work, 2 neighbors, the pastor, and Wren, standing at the graveside with her hands folded, in a black dress she had bought at the second-hand store for $9, looking at the dirt that was about to cover her father, and feeling for the first time that the world had a bottom, and she had just hit it. The house wasn't hers. It had been rented for the last 14 years. From a man named Whitaker who owned 3 houses in town. He came by 3 days after the funeral. He stood on the porch with his hat in his hand. He told her how sorry he was, and then he told her gently that his daughter and son-in-law needed the house, that she had 2 weeks, that he was sorry, that he wished he could do more. She thanked him, because he was being kind, and because she had been expecting it. She started packing that night. She filled 3 boxes for Goodwill. She kept her father's wool fishing sweater, the one her mother had knit for him the winter before she died, and she kept the framed photograph from the mantelpiece, her parents on the beach in Florida, 2007. Adeline in a yellow sundress, Silas with his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something the photographer had said. The last room she packed was the living room. The recliner had been moved away from the wall by the men who came to take her father out. It was sitting at an angle in the middle of the carpet with one of the cushions tipped sideways. Wren went to push the cushion back into place, and she felt something underneath it. 2 envelopes, white, sealed, slightly warm from where they had been pressed against the springs of the chair. She lifted them out slowly, like they might break. The first envelope had her name written on it, in her father's handwriting, the slanted, careful script he used for important things. Beneath her name he had written 2 more words, read first. The second envelope had her name on it too, but beneath her name on this one, he had written something else, something she did not understand. Open only when you find your water. And in smaller letters beneath that, an address she had never heard of, Cocodrie, Louisiana. Wren sat down on the floor, right there in the middle of the living room, with the lamp on, and the boxes half packed around her, and the smell of her father still faintly in the room, like coffee and pine cleaner, and the lavender her mother had once kept in a bowl on the side table. She opened the first envelope. Her hands were shaking. The letter was one page, folded twice, in his slanting handwriting. Ren, I am sorry. I am sorry I closed the door. I am sorry I stopped being your father in the way you needed. I did not know how to keep going after we lost her. I did not know how, and I did not have it in me to fake it for you. I should have. I should have tried harder. I should have been the man she would have wanted me to be. I was not, and I am sorry. Your mother belongs to water. So do you. Do not be afraid of it. Follow it. It will know what to do with you. I never did. I love you, child. I have loved you every day, even on the days when I could not show it. Daddy. Ren read the letter once, then again, then a third time, and then she lowered her face into her hands, and she cried, for the first time since the medic had come, for the first time since the funeral, for the first time really since she had been 11 years old. She cried for her father, and she cried for her mother, and she cried for the 8 years of silence that had sat between them all like a wall. The second envelope she did not open. Open only when you find your water, her father had written. She did not know what that meant, but she knew deep in some place she did not have a name for that it meant something. She put the second envelope inside her mother's Bible, the one that had been under her pillow for 8 years. She closed the Bible, she wrapped it in a clean t-shirt, and she packed it carefully into the very middle of her duffel bag. The next morning she called Macklin Reed. She asked him if his brother in Louisiana was still willing to teach her. He said yes, right away, without asking why, the way good men sometimes do. And then he said one more thing. Take this with you, Ren. He gave her an envelope of cash. $300. He said it was a loan. He said she could pay him back when she was ready. He said his brother's name was Thaddeus, and his brother would meet her at the bus station in Houma. And his brother would not ask questions, because his brother was that kind of man. She added the $300 to the Folgers coffee can. The total was $1,128. That was what she had to start the rest of her life. The morning the lease ended, she walked out of the house with her duffel bag and her backpack and the coffee can wrapped in her father's fishing sweater. She stood on the porch for a long minute, looking at the door she would never walk through again. Then she pulled it closed, and she walked to the bus station. The ride south was long. Mississippi rolled into Louisiana as the land flattened and the air grew thick and wet. The trees changed. Oak gave way to cypress and tupelo, with roots standing in dark water, like the legs of patient animals. Spanish moss hung from the branches, long, gray, soft as old hair. Ren watched it all through the bus window with the kind of attention she gave to anything she was trying to memorize. This was a place she had never been, but it felt like a place she had always somehow known about, the way you know the shape of a word in a language you do not speak. She arrived in Houma at dusk. The bus station was a small concrete building, beside a gas station. The air smelled like gasoline and rain and something else. Something green. Something living. Something old. A man was waiting in a dented Ford F-250. He was in his early 60s. Salt and pepper beard, same as his brother's. Skin tanned darker than Macklin's. He looked at her once, nodded, got out, took her duffel bag without asking, and put it in the bed of the truck. Thaddeus, he said. Ren, she said. That was the whole conversation. He drove with one hand on the wheel and the other elbow out the window. He did not ask her about her father. He did not ask her about Macklin. He did not ask her where she was going to sleep that night. She liked him immediately. The repair shop was 10 miles outside of town, an open-sided wooden building, with a corrugated tin roof, a small dock that reached out into a dark inlet. The water was glass flat in the dusk. The cypress trees on the far side stood black against an orange sky. A handful of boats were tied along the dock, a fishing skiff, a cabin cruiser with weed-streaked sides, an aluminum John boat, and at the very end of the dock, listing slightly to port, as if it had grown tired and was leaning against something for support, was an old houseboat. Thaddeus pointed at it without saying anything. Wren walked down the dock. The boards creaked under her feet. The water lapped quietly against the pilings. A heron stood in the shallows, one leg up, watching her without alarm. The houseboat was about 30 feet long. The hull was steel, painted white originally, now mostly rust, with bare metal showing through in patches. The cabin sat on top of the hull, a flat-roofed wooden structure with peeling turquoise paint, 2 small windows along each side. A weathered wooden door faced the dock. An old life ring hung crooked on the railing, the rope rotted but still attached. The boat sat low in the water, weighted with whatever was inside it, and whatever water had seeped in over the years. But Wren could see the lines. She could see what the boat had been. She walked back to where Thaddeus was standing, by his truck. "Who did it belong to?" she asked. Thaddeus looked at the boat, then back at her. He took his time. "Man named Ezra Thibodeau," he said. "Lived on her for 40 years. Died last September. No family. Marina was going to sell her for scrap." He paused. "But Ezra left a will." She waited. "It's a strange one," Thaddeus said. "Stranger than most." He told her. The boat would be sold for exactly $10. Not 9. Not 11. 10. The buyer had to be under the age of 25. The buyer was not allowed to ask a single question before they paid. Not about the boat. Not about Ezra. Not about anything. If they asked even one question, the sale was off. "3 people have come for her already," Thaddeus said. 2 boys from town, 1 woman driving through from Texas. They all wanted to know what was wrong with her, what had to be fixed, what kind of motor she had. Reasonable questions, all of them. He looked at the boat, then at Wren. His eyes were not unkind, but they were testing something. "Marina turned all 3 of them away," he said, "per Ezra's instructions." Wren was quiet. She thought about her father. Open only when you find your water. She thought about her mother. Belongs to water. She thought about all the years of drawing boats with stick-figure sailors, and all the bus rides to Jackson, and all the catalogs she had memorized at the dinner table while her father stared at the evening news. She did not say anything. She set her backpack on the ground. She knelt down beside it. She unzipped the side pocket. She lifted out the Folgers coffee can. The lid was rusted at the rim. The label was faded. She popped the lid. She counted out 10 $1 bills. She stood up. She walked to Thaddeus Reed. She placed the bills in his open palm. She did not ask a question. Thaddeus looked at the money. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile, and his face changed completely. "Macklin said you knew your stuff," he said. "He told me you were quiet. He told me you listened. He told me you didn't ask things that didn't need asking." He closed his hand around the $10. He was right about all 3. He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a brass key, old, worn. The teeth were polished smooth from 40 years of use. He pressed it into her hand. "She's yours, Wren Calloway." Wren stood on the dock, holding the key. A boat. Her boat. She could not feel her own feet. Thaddeus watched her face. He nodded once. "Sleep on her tonight," he said. "We'll start in the morning. Sunrise. Bring coffee." He walked back to his truck. He climbed in. He drove away. And Wren was alone, on the dock, with $10 less, a duffel bag, a backpack, a coffee can, a Bible, an unopened envelope, and a 30-foot rusted steel houseboat That was, as of 2 minutes ago, her home. She walked to the cabin door. She put the key in the lock. She turned it. The door opened with a soft groan, like something that had been holding its breath and had finally been allowed to exhale. She stepped inside. The cabin was small, maybe 10 feet by 12. There was a built-in bunk along one wall. The mattress was rotted at the corners, stained with old water. A small galley took up the opposite wall, a propane stove that had corroded to uselessness, a folding table, 2 folding chairs, a few cabinets mostly empty. The wood was swollen from years of humidity. The air smelled like mildew and old fabric, and the faint sweet rot that water-damaged wood gets after enough years. It was a wreck, but it was floating, and it was hers. She set her bags on the table. She stood in the middle of the cabin, and she turned slowly in a circle. She could feel the boat moving under her feet, a gentle rocking, from the small wake of a fish jumping outside. The walls were close, the ceiling was low, the light coming through the small windows was dim and green gold, like light filtered through bayou water and Spanish moss. Something about it felt right. She could not explain it. Maybe it was the rocking, the way the floor moved like something alive. Maybe it was the smallness. Maybe it was just that this was her first boat. After all those years of drawing them, whatever it was, she felt it. The way you feel a key turn in a lock you did not know was there. She unpacked slowly. She laid her father's wool fishing sweater on the rotted mattress. She set the framed photograph of her parents on the table. She placed the Folgers coffee can beside it. And then she lifted her mother's Bible out of the duffel bag, still wrapped in the clean t-shirt. She unwrapped it. She held it for a long moment. She did not open it. She set it on the table, beside the photograph, beside the coffee can, with the second envelope still tucked inside it. Then she sat down on the floor, and the bayou outside came alive with sounds she had never heard before. Frogs, a chorus of them, hundreds, maybe thousands, calling from the cypress roots. Owls, low and slow, a splash, far off, that might have been a fish, or might have been an alligator. And then, faintly, across the water, came another sound. She did not understand it at first. She tilted her head. She listened. It was singing, a choir of voices, slow, soft, hymn-like, carried across the still water from somewhere on the far side of the inlet. She could not see the building. The trees were too thick. But somewhere across the bayou in the gathering dark, there was a small chapel, and the people inside it were singing. Wren sat very still. She did not know any of the words. She could not even make out the melody clearly. The voices were too far away. They came across the water in fragments, a rising note, a held syllable, the shape of a hymn rather than the hymn itself. But she had heard her mother sing those same notes once, a long time ago, in the kitchen, while the meatloaf was in the oven. She did not cry. She just listened, for a long time, until the singing stopped, until the frogs took back the night, until the only light left was a thin slice of moon over the cypress trees, and the small green glow of the running lights on the dock. She crawled into her sleeping bag on the floor of the cabin. The rotted mattress shoved against the wall. The boards under her smelled like wet wood and 40 years of someone else's quiet. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 8 years, without thinking about it, without deciding to, without even fully knowing she was doing it, she prayed. It was not a long prayer. It was not even a full sentence. It was just 2 words, whispered into the dark. Thank you. She did not know who she was thanking, but she said it, and then she slept. Thaddeus came at 6 in the morning. He brought 2 paper cups of black coffee and a small white bag of beignets. The powdered sugar was already starting to soak through the paper. He set them on the dock. He sat down. He waited. Wren stepped off the boat with her hair still wet from washing in the marina spigot. She sat down beside him. They drank coffee. They ate beignets. They watched the sun come up over the cypress trees. Pink, then gold, then white. Spanish moss caught fire in the slanting light. After a while, Thaddeus spoke. "List is long," he said. "I figured. Hull needs patching, sanding, repainting. Cabin needs gutting and rebuilding. Plumbing is non-existent. Electrical is suspect. Propane is a fire hazard waiting to happen. Bilge pump is seized. Wiring is 40 years old and half of it is wrong. Roof leaks. Windows are loose. Door swells in the wet." "Okay. 6 months if you do it right. Maybe more." "Okay." He looked at her sideways. "You can stay on her while you work, but it's going to be rough." She nodded. "I can do rough." He drank his coffee. "You start where?" he asked. She had thought about that. Last night, before she slept. "Bilge," she said. He nodded slowly, approvingly. "Good answer." The bilge is the lowest part of a boat, the space below the floor, where water collects, where smells accumulate, where if you are not careful, mold and rot and mystery quietly grow. Wren lifted the hatch in the cabin floor. The hinges screamed. The wood of the hatch was soft at one corner, soft enough that her fingernail pressed a small dent into it. She set the hatch aside. She looked down. The bilge was full of water, about 6 inches of it, dark, almost black, smelling of rust and rotted leaves. She climbed down into it, with a bucket, and the old coffee can, now empty of money, but useful as a bailer. She scooped, she dumped, she scooped, she dumped. For 2 hours. Her back ached, her hands cramped, her shirt was soaked, her hair stuck to her forehead. She moved on her knees in cramped quarters with her flashlight clipped to the chest pocket of her father's old fishing sweater. Slowly, the water level dropped. 4 inches, 2 inches, 1 inch. A film of mud and rotted debris. She used a sponge to soak up the last of it. She wrung the sponge out into the bucket. She did that 30 times. And then finally the bilge was dry. She shone her flashlight down into it. The hull was steel down there, dark and pitted and smelling faintly of old machine grease. The ribs of the boat curved up from the keel like the inside of a sleeping animal. And right in the middle of the bilge, sitting on a small wooden platform that had been built up off the keel to keep it above the waterline, was something Wren had not expected to see. She stared at it. Her heart, which had been beating slow and steady from the work, began to beat faster. She shifted her flashlight. The platform was rotted at the edges, soft and dark. But the thing sitting on top of it, the thing the platform had been built to protect, the thing was intact. It was a wooden footlocker. Old, the kind of footlocker that had been built before she was born, before her father had been born. Brass corners, leather straps gone stiff with age, a heavy padlock rusted shut. It was the size of a small steamer trunk, and it had been sitting there, hidden, waiting, for 40 years. Wren stayed very still. She did not know how long she crouched there in the bilge, looking down at it, with her flashlight beam shaking just slightly, and the bayou outside the open hatch chirping and humming with its early morning noise. She felt suddenly that she was not alone. That was the only way she could have explained it. Even later, even years later, she felt that somewhere, in the cypress trees, in the dock boards, in the steel ribs of the old boat that creaked gently around her, was a presence, not frightening, not unkind, just there, watching. She climbed slowly out of the bilge. She replaced the hatch loosely over the opening. She walked out onto the deck. The morning had warmed. The fog was lifting off the inlet. Thaddeus was standing on the dock, looking at something on his phone. "Thaddeus," she said. He looked up. He saw her face. He pocketed the phone immediately. "What is it?" She tried to find words. She could not. So she just said the only true ones she could think of. "There's something down there." He did not ask what. He stepped onto the boat. Wren led him into the cabin. She lifted the hatch again. Thaddeus knelt at the edge. He looked down. He was very quiet for a long time. She watched his face in the half-dark. She watched his eyes move over the footlocker, over the platform, over the rotted wood. She saw him exhale slowly. She saw him close his eyes. She saw something pass across his face that she did not understand. Something old, something soft, something almost like recognition. He opened his eyes. He looked up at her, and he said very quietly, the strangest thing he could possibly have said. "He told me. He told me once." I didn't believe him. Wren waited. Finally, Thaddeus spoke again. Ezra was an interesting man. That was all. She waited. She did not push. She had learned from her father that men like this would talk in their own time, or not at all, and either was their right. After a while, Thaddeus sat back on his heels. He looked at her. "He told me once," he said, "about 15 years ago. We were having coffee on this dock, right out there, and he told me he had buried something on this boat, something he wanted to leave to someone. He did not say who. He did not say what. He just said the boat would tell the right person when the time came." Thaddeus paused. "I thought he was being poetic," he said. "Ezra got like that sometimes. Old men by themselves. They start talking like preachers." He looked down at the footlocker. He wasn't being poetic. Wren felt a small shiver run up the back of her neck, the kind of shiver that has nothing to do with the temperature. They lifted the footlocker out of the bilge together. It was heavy, heavier than she had expected, the way a wooden trunk is heavy when it is full of metal. They set it on the cabin floor. The light from the small windows caught on the brass corners, made them glow soft amber, like something out of an old painting. Thaddeus went back to his truck. He came back with a hacksaw. He handed it to her. "It's your boat," he said. "You should be the one." Wren took the saw. She knelt down. She braced the rusted padlock against the wood. She began to cut. The blade screamed against the rust. It took her almost 20 minutes. Her arms burned. Her shoulders ached. Sweat ran into her eyes. But she did not stop, because something in her did not want Thaddeus to finish it for her, because the lock was hers to open, because Ezra, whoever he had been, had left this for someone who could do the work. The lock fell with a dull thud onto the cabin floor. Wren unbuckled the leather straps. They cracked softly. The leather was dry as old bone. She lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were rows of small canvas bags, each one tied with a piece of brown twine, each one labeled with a paper tag tied to the twine. Each tag had a date written on it, in faded ink, in a careful slanting hand that had not been hurried even once. The earliest tag said 1985. The latest tag said 2024. 40 bags, one for each year. Wren lifted the first one, the one labeled 1985. It was heavier than it looked. She untied the twine. She opened the bag. Coins, old silver coins, Walking Liberty $50, Morgan silver dollars, a Mercury dime worn smooth, a handful of buffalo nickels, dozens of them packed tightly inside the canvas. She lifted another bag, 1992, paper money, folded carefully in half, held with a brittle rubber band that crumbled when she touched it. A third bag, 2003, mixed coins and bills. A fourth, 2007, mostly quarters, with a folded note inside that simply read, "A good year." the year a child was born nearby. Thank you for that. Wren did not understand the note. Not yet. She kept counting. It took 2 days. 2. Thaddeus helped her. He drove her to a coin dealer he knew, a small shop in Thibodeau. The dealer was a tiny Cajun man with magnifying glasses on a chain around his neck. He weighed the silver. He tested it. He gave her honest numbers. He looked at her with kind eyes the whole time. When the counting was done, when every coin had been weighed and every bill had been laid flat and the totals had been added, the footlocker held $48,217. 40 years of one quiet man's savings for someone he had never met. At the very bottom of the footlocker, beneath the last canvas bag, was a folded American flag. Wren did not understand the flag either. Not yet. And beneath the flag, a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front was the same slanting, careful script as the date tags, the kind of handwriting an older person uses when they want to be sure, the kind of handwriting that takes its time. The envelope said, "To whoever finds this." Wren held it for a long time before she opened it. The morning was warm. The cabin door was open. The bayou outside was bright. A breeze moved through the cypresses and made the Spanish moss sway. Somewhere across the inlet, a heron made one rough cry, and then another. She broke the seal. She unfolded the letter. It was 3 pages long, written front and back, in ink that had faded a little but not too much. The hand was steady, careful. The hand of a man who had thought every word out before he set it down. She read aloud, without meaning to, the way some people do when they want a thing to be real. My name is Ezra Thibodeau. I was born in Cocodrie, Louisiana, in 1948. I have lived a small life. I do not say that with regret. I say it with gratitude. Some lives are meant to be small. Some lives are meant to be a steady candle in one window in one house for one long, quiet stretch of years. That is what I have tried to be. I had a girl once, a long time ago, before any of this. Her name was Cecile. She drowned in a bayou storm 2 weeks before our wedding day. I was 22. She was 20. The chapel where we were going to marry now stands across the inlet from this dock. I have been able to see it from my deck every day for 40 years. That is not a coincidence. That is the only reason I stayed. After Cecile, I could not stay in Cocodrie. The whole town looked like her. I went to Homa. I worked at the sugar refinery for 15 years before I could come back to this water. The chapel kept calling me, so I came back. I bought this boat in 1985 with $400 from a man who needed to leave town in a hurry and did not have time to dicker over a price. I have lived on her since. Every year I saved what I could. I put it in a bag with that year written on the tag. There were lean years. There were heavier years. The bag from 1986 is almost empty because that year I bought a new propane stove and a winter coat and not much else. The bag from 2012 is the heaviest because that was the year I sold my truck and I knew I would not need the money for anything in particular. I do not have family. The people I once loved are mostly gone. I did not become a bitter man. I did not become a good man either. I became a quiet one. I went to the chapel on Sunday. I kept the boat afloat, and I worked at the marina mending nets and patching skiffs until my hands gave out last spring. I do not have anyone to leave this money to, so I am leaving it to whoever finds it. If you found this footlocker, you came onto my boat for a reason. Maybe you were lost. Maybe you needed a place to be. Maybe you were trying to build something. Maybe you were just tired. I was all of those things once. I hope this helps you. The boat is a good one. She has carried me a long way without ever moving from her slip. Some boats are like that. Some lives are like that. Take care of her. There was a small space at the bottom of the 3rd page, and then in a different ink, as if it had been added later, as if it had been added on a different morning by a hand that had been hesitating for a long time before it set the pen down. There were 3 more lines. If a woman named Adeline ever finds this letter, or if it ever finds its way to her hand, even after I am gone, please tell her I still pray for her every morning. I have prayed for her every morning since the summer of 1977. I never stopped. She will know. Wren read the last 3 lines twice, and then a 3rd time. Her hand began to shake. Adeline. Her mother's name was Adeline. Her mother's name was Adeline. That was a common name. That was an old name. That was a name that meant nothing on its own. It could be anyone. It could be anyone in this whole state. It could be anyone in this whole country. Except. Her father's letter had said, "Your mother belongs to water. Follow it. It will know what to do with you." Except the 2nd envelope, the one still tucked inside her mother's Bible, was addressed to Cocodrie, Louisiana. Except Ezra Thibodeau had been born in Cocodrie, Louisiana. Except. She set the letter on the cabin table. She set both hands flat on the table. She breathed, and out loud to no one. With no one to hear her, she said the only word she could think of. "Mama." Thaddeus drove her to the chapel that afternoon. He did not ask why she needed to go. He did not ask what was in the letter. He just looked at her face and said, "Get in the truck." The chapel was small, painted white, with a tin roof that had gone soft brown with age. It sat on a slight rise above the bayou. A gravel path led from a wooden dock up to the front steps. The cross on the steeple leaned a little to the east, as if it had been listening for a long time to something coming from that direction. The sign over the door said, "Chapel of Sainte Cécile." Wren stared at the sign. Cécile, the girl Ezra had loved, the girl who drowned 2 weeks before the wedding, the chapel where they had been going to marry. She had not been there. She had been here. He had named it for her, or someone had, a long time ago. The wooden door creaked. Wren stepped inside. The chapel was empty. The pews were old cypress, hand-built, the kind of pews that had been made by men who had time. The altar was simple. White cloth, a wooden cross, a small statue of a young woman in a blue robe, with one hand at her heart and the other turned outward in a quiet open gesture. A side door opened. A man stepped out. He was perhaps 60. White hair neatly cut, dark trousers, a simple black shirt with a clerical collar. His face was the kind of face that had been made smooth by many years of listening to people who were sad. "Can I help you, child?" he said. His voice was soft. It was the kind of voice that did not need to be loud to be heard. "My name is Wren Calloway," she said. "I bought a houseboat across the inlet 2 days ago, from a man named Ezra Thibodeau. I think he used to come here." The priest stood very still. He looked at her face for a long moment. Then his own face changed. It was a small change. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. His eyes softened, as if someone had set down a weight he had been holding for a long time. "Father Beaumont," he said. He extended his hand. "Yes, Ezra came here, every Sunday for 40 years. He sat in the last pew, on the left, closest to the side window, so he could see the water." Wren took his hand. It was warm, and dry, and very steady. "Come," Father Beaumont said. "Sit. There is someone you should meet." He led her down the aisle, to the very last pew, on the left, by the side window, through which she could see exactly as she had been told the dark inlet of the bayou, and in the distance, far across the water, the small white shape of her own houseboat tied at Thaddeus's dock. A man was sitting in the pew. He was old, past 80, hair gone fully white, skin like soft worn leather. He wore a flannel shirt buttoned at the collar, and he held a cane between his knees, with both hands resting on top of the cane. He looked up as they approached. His eyes were the palest blue Wren had ever seen. "Hollis," Father Beaumont said, "this is the girl who bought Ezra's boat." The old man's pale eyes moved over Wren's face. He took a slow breath in. He let it out again. "Lord have mercy," he said, very softly, almost to himself. "Sit down, child." Wren sat. Hollis Landry kept looking at her, like a man who was trying to remember something, or maybe like a man who had just finally remembered it. After a long minute he spoke. "You favor your mother some." Wren went still. The bayou outside the window was bright. The water moved softly. A pelican glided low across the inlet. "You knew her," Wren said. It was not a question. "I knew Adeline Calloway when she was 8 years old," Hollis said. "She used to come to Cocodrie in the summers. She used to come and stay with her grandfather, who was a dear friend of mine, until he passed in '92. He paused. "And she used to come to this chapel, with Ezra, every Sunday morning. She would sit right where you are sitting. She wore a yellow ribbon in her hair. She was Child, the sweetest little girl I ever saw in my life." Wren's throat closed. She could not speak. Hollis lowered his eyes to the cane between his knees. "I am sorry to hear she is gone," he said. "I figured she must be. When she stopped writing to Ezra, about 8 years ago, he never said, but you could see it on him." "How?" Wren said. Her voice was barely there. "How did you know my name?" Hollis looked up at her. He smiled, very faintly, very tiredly, very kindly. "Honey," he said, "you walk in here looking like Adeline did at 19, and you tell us you bought Ezra's boat. Who else would you be?" Wren did not go back to the houseboat that night. She stayed in the small guest room of the rectory beside the chapel. Father Beaumont made her a sandwich. He warmed milk on the stove. He set both in front of her without saying anything. The way you serve food to a person who has just survived something. And he left her alone. She did not sleep. She lay on top of the quilt, with the chapel windows open, and the night air thick with the smell of bayou water and cypress and the faint sweetness of the night-blooming jasmine that grew along the rectory wall. She thought about her mother. She thought about her father. She thought about a man she had never met, who had prayed for her mother every morning, for 40 years. She thought about the second envelope, still tucked inside the Bible, sitting on the cabin table of a boat across the dark water, still unopened, because she had not yet found her water. Or had she? She did not know. She did not know. The next morning she went back to the boat. She told Thaddeus what Father Beaumont and Hollis had said. He listened without interrupting. He drank his coffee. He looked out at the water. After she finished, he said only one thing. "Then there is more. Boats like Ezra's. Men like Ezra. There is always more." She started looking. She tore out the cabin floor first, slowly, carefully, plank by plank, looking for hollow spots, for loose boards, for anything that did not belong. She checked the bilge again, with the flashlight, inch by inch. She checked the walls. She tapped along them with the handle of a screwdriver, listening for the change in sound that means hollow space behind solid wood. For 2 days, she found nothing. On the third day, she pulled the rotted mattress off the built-in bunk frame. The bunk had 3 storage drawers underneath. She pulled them out. She tipped them upside down. She inspected them on every side. The third drawer was lighter than the others. She set it on the cabin table. She turned it over. She looked at the bottom. There was a false panel, glued in place, painted to match the rest, almost invisible. But she had spent 3 years in a marine supply store, and she knew by the weight and by the way the wood sat that this panel was not original. She pried it off with her thumbnail. Inside the false bottom of the third drawer was a book, bound in soft black leather, the size of a paperback, the corners worn pale from being held, a prayer journal. Wren took it out. She sat down at the cabin table, with the morning light coming in through the small windows, with the heron standing again in the shallows outside, with her hands trembling. She opened it. Each page was a single day. At the top, the date, in Ezra's slanting, careful hand, and below the date, a short list of names, the people he was praying for that morning. Some pages had only 2 names. Some pages had a dozen. Some pages had just one name, underlined, as if some mornings had been harder than others, and on the harder mornings he had focused on one soul, and one soul only. She flipped through the book slowly. The earliest date was January 1st, 1985. The latest date was the morning of his death, September 2025. Wren scanned the names. Father Beaumont was there, often. Hollis Landry was there, often. Cecile was there, every single page, the first name, every single morning, for 40 years. And then she saw it, on the very first page she opened, January 1st, 1985, in a list of children beneath the heading, for the lambs in his care. Adeline, already there, from the first morning of the journal, as if she had been on his list for years before, which Wren now understood. She had been. She flipped forward. February. Adeline. April. Adeline. 1990. Adeline. 2000. Adeline. 2007. Adeline. She skipped to 2007. She was looking for something. She did not know what. She found it on the second page she opened. June, the 12th. A new name. Written carefully, as if it had been written for the first time that morning, as if Ezra had taken his pen and held it over the page for a long moment before setting the letters down. Wren. That was her birthday. June 12th, 2007. She read it 3 times. Wren. 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 A man she had never met, 1,000 miles south, had begun praying for her by name. On the morning she was born. She turned the page. The next day, June 13th. Wren. And Adeline. She turned more pages. June 15th. Wren. June 20th. Wren. July 1st. Wren. 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 From that day on. Wren. Almost every page. For 18 years. She closed the book. She set it on the table. She lowered her face into her hands, and she wept. She did not cry the way she had cried in the living room. After her father. That had been a tearing kind of cry. A breaking. This was different. This was a slow, steady cry. The kind of cry that does not break a person. The kind of cry that builds something. Outside on the bayou, the heron lifted from the shallows. It rose up over the cypresses. It flew once across the inlet, toward the chapel of Saint Cecile, and then it was gone. The next 6 months were the hardest work of her life, and the best. She rebuilt the boat from the keel up, with Thaddeus showing her each next step, the way Macklin Reed had shown her 3 years earlier in another life, that a system can be understood, and anything that can be understood can be fixed. She hauled the boat out of the water with Thaddeus's winch. She sanded the hull down to bare steel, inch by inch, day after day. Her arms shook every night when she crawled into her sleeping bag. She treated the rust with phosphoric acid. She built up the patched sections with marine epoxy. She feathered the edges, the way Thaddeus showed her, the way Macklin had described it, until the patches flowed into the surrounding metal so smoothly she could not feel them with her palm. She primed the hull in pale gray. She painted it in 2 coats, then 3, a deep dark blue that the mixer at the supply store in Houma chose for her without her asking. The man took one look at her face and said, "I know the color you want." He was right. When the first stripe went on, she stepped back, and she knew. It was the color of bayou water at midnight, the color of safety, the color of something kept. She gutted the cabin. She rebuilt it in cedar and marine plywood. She put in new windows, larger ones, so that light would fill the cabin in the morning. She added a skylight above the table, so that on Sunday mornings the sun would fall directly on the place where she ate. She rewired everything. Marine-grade cable, color-coded, the way she had been taught. She installed a small solar panel on the roof, 2 deep-cycle batteries beneath the bunk. She replaced the propane stove, properly vented, with a shut-off valve, and a carbon monoxide detector mounted to the ceiling above it. She built a 30-gallon fresh water tank, a hand pump, a composting toilet behind a curtain, and in the bow. She built herself a bed, with drawers underneath for clothing, and bookshelves on every wall. She kept Ezra's footlocker. She cleaned the brass corners. She oiled the leather straps. She placed the empty footlocker beneath the new bed, where she could see it every morning when she made the bed. Inside the footlocker she kept 3 things: the folded American flag, her parents' photograph from 2007, and the prayer journal, the second envelope from her father. She still had not opened it. She did not know why. Open only when you find your water, her father had written. She was on water. She was on the very water her mother had played beside as a child, and still she did not feel that it was time. She was waiting. For what she did not know. But she was waiting. The people of the bayou learned her. That was the only way to put it. They did not befriend her, not the way they did in towns up north. They learned her, the way you learn a dog you mean to keep, slowly, with patience, with small gestures repeated over weeks. A woman named Odile Hebert ran a small Cajun kitchen 2 miles down the road. She was perhaps 55, round, loud, generous, with hands that had been chopping onions since she was a girl. She started bringing Ren gumbo on Fridays. She came in a battered red Ford pickup, with a cooler in the bed. 2 mason jars warm from the cooler. She would hand them through the truck window and say only one thing: "You eat share." Ren tried to pay her the first time. Odile waved the money off as if it were a fly. Ezra's friend got fed, always, every Friday, 40 years. I am not breaking the tradition for some skinny girl with paint on her hands. Ren did not know what to say, so she said the only true thing. Thank you. A man named Joubert Arsenault ran a shrimping skiff out of the next inlet over. He was perhaps 60, with a beard gone halfway gray. He smelled always of salt and diesel and Old Spice. He came over one afternoon in his skiff. He tied up at Ren's dock without asking permission, and he climbed onto her deck. "Thaddeus says you eat free at Odile's," he said. "Yes, sir." "That ain't right. You should learn to feed yourself." She blinked. "Okay." Joubert taught her to set crawfish traps. He taught her to bait them with chicken necks. He taught her which side of the bank to lay them on. He taught her to check them at dawn, before the herons got to them. Within a month, she had crawfish. She boiled them in a big pot on her new propane stove, with cayenne and lemon, and a beer from a 6-pack Thaddeus had handed her one Friday, and she ate them on her deck, watching the sun come up over the cypresses, with grease on her fingers, and steam rising off the pot, and a heron, possibly the same one, standing in the shallows watching her. She had never been less alone in her life. She started going to the chapel. She did not go every Sunday at first. She went some Sundays. She sat in the last pew, on the left, by the side window, in Ezra's seat. Hollis Landry came in his Sunday best every week, pressed white shirt, pale blue tie. He sat beside her without asking. He gave her a small nod when she sat down. He did not look at her again until the service ended. She did not know the hymns at first. She mouthed the words. She listened to the voices around her. She listened to Hollis sing in a thin, reedy voice that had clearly been a beautiful tenor 60 years before, and one Sunday in the 2nd month, without deciding to, without planning it, she sang, Just one verse of one hymn, very softly, almost under her breath. The voice that came out of her was small and uncertain, and it broke once on a high note, but it sang. Hollis did not turn his head, but he reached over, and he put one old leathery hand very lightly on top of hers, and he kept it there for the rest of the hymn. When the song was over, he lifted his hand away. He never said a word about it, and every Sunday after, she came back, and she sang a little more, and she sat a little straighter, and the prayer journal grew in some quiet way to include her too. It was the 5th month when the man in the suit arrived. It was a Wednesday, late October. The bayou was bright. The cypresses were beginning to turn rust-colored at the tips. The boat was almost finished. Wren was on the dock, sanding the door for a final coat of varnish, with her sleeves rolled up. A black sedan pulled into the gravel lot of Thaddeus's shop. It did not belong. She knew, without looking up, that it did not belong. The cars that came to Thaddeus's shop were trucks, or skiffs trailered behind trucks, or once a moped, never a black sedan. A man got out. He was perhaps 40, wearing a navy suit, a red tie, polished shoes that did not have a single speck of bayou mud on them yet. He carried a leather briefcase. He walked down the dock. He stopped a polite distance from her. "Are you Wren Calloway?" She set down her sandpaper. "Yes," he smiled. It was a smile that he had used many times, on many people, in many places that were not Louisiana. "My name is Hadley Vance. I represent the estate of Ezra Thibodeau. Or rather, I represent the rightful heirs of his estate. May I have a moment of your time?" Wren stood up. She did not answer right away. She wiped her hands on the legs of her jeans. She looked past him at Thaddeus's shop. Thaddeus had come out onto the front porch. He was standing with his arms crossed, watching. "Heirs," she said. "Yes, I represent a distant cousin of Mr. Thibodeau from Baton Rouge. We have only recently become aware of his passing, and of the disposition of his property, including He gestured at the houseboat, "including this vessel." "Ezra didn't have family," Wren said. "He wrote it in his letter." "With respect," Hadley Vance said. "Mr. Thibodeau was a private man. Such men often forget the breadth of their extended family, or they wish for personal reasons to forget. My client is a second cousin once removed, through Mr. Thibodeau's late mother. We have documentation, of course." He set the briefcase on the dock. He opened it. He removed a manila folder. "There is also," he said, "the matter of the cash." Wren went very still. "The cash," she said. "I have been led to believe, by certain parties at the bank in Homa, that you came into possession of a substantial sum upon taking possession of this boat. My client wishes to recover those funds, in addition to the vessel itself." He smiled again. "This need not be unpleasant, Miss Calloway. We can resolve it amicably, or we can take it to probate court, which will, I am afraid, be quite expensive, and quite slow, and given the documentation we have." He let the sentence trail off. "Likely to end in our favor." Wren said nothing. Her face did nothing. She had grown up with a father who taught her by example that a face that does nothing is the strongest face there is. "I will leave these documents with you," Hadley Vance said, "to review. I will return in 72 hours to discuss your decision." He set the manila folder on the dock at her feet. He closed the briefcase. He turned. He walked back to his sedan. He drove away. She stood on the dock for a long time, looking at the folder, not moving. Thaddeus came down to the dock. He picked up the folder. He flipped through it. His jaw set tighter with every page. When he had finished, he closed the folder. He handed it to her. "Looks legitimate," he said. "Don't mean it is, but it looks it. What do I do?" "You think." "Okay." "And you pray." She looked up at him. She nodded. That night, Wren did not sleep. She lay in her new bed, with the cabin smelling of fresh varnish and cedar, with the new windows letting moonlight in over her face, with the prayer journal open on the pillow beside her. She thought about the cash, about what it had bought her, new tools, the hull paint, the cedar siding, the solar panel, the composting toilet, the new lock for the cabin door, every small thing that had made this boat her home. She thought about giving it back. She thought about the school in Houma she had begun to think about, the one she had wanted to put aside money for, a small scholarship, for girls in towns like the one she had come from, where the river was 40 miles away, and the boats only existed in crayon drawings folded inside a kitchen drawer. She thought about Ezra, praying for her name every morning from the day she was born. She thought, and she prayed, for the first time, really. Not whispered into the dark on a first night, not mouthed in the back pew of a chapel. She prayed, with her hands folded on top of the prayer journal, with her eyes closed, with her face turned toward the small skylight her own hands had built into the ceiling. She said, aloud, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who that man is. I don't know if his papers are real. I don't know what to do tomorrow morning. But I think there is something I haven't seen yet. So please, if there is something, show me, soon. She slept. She woke before dawn. She got up. She made coffee. She drank it standing on the deck. She watched the sun come up. Pink, then gold, then white. And then she went back inside. And she started over. She tore the cabin apart again. She checked every drawer, every panel, every shelf. She looked for what she had missed. She found it just after 11 in the morning. The bookshelf along the back wall. She had built it herself, from cedar, 2 months earlier. 6 shelves, each one perfectly level, but the bottom shelf, she had built it. So why did the wood underneath it sound different when she tapped on it? She knelt down. She tapped again. Hollow. She tapped the boards beside it. Solid. Solid. Hollow. She had built it. She had built the shelf herself, but she had built it on top of a section of wall that she had not opened up, because the wall had seemed solid, because she had been moving fast, because Thaddeus had said the boat was almost done. She got her crowbar. She pried up the bottom shelf. The cedar came up easily, and behind it, set into the wall, was a small metal box. She lifted it out. It was heavier than she expected, painted gray, about the size of a shoebox. The lid was held by 2 small clasps. They were not locked. They were just held. She undid them. She opened the box. Inside, wrapped in a soft yellow cloth, was a stack of black and white photographs, old ones, the kind with white scalloped borders, the kind her grandmother might have had in a shoebox in a closet. Wren lifted the stack out. She turned them over slowly, one by one, with the morning sun coming through the new skylight and falling directly onto the table. The first photograph showed a young man, maybe 20, standing on a dock, holding a fishing pole, smiling. Behind him, a houseboat with peeling turquoise paint and a steel hull. Ezra, 40 years younger. The second showed 2 boys in their teens, standing on a porch in a small town, both of them grinning. One was clearly Ezra. The other was a boy Wren did not recognize, but she did not need to. The boy's eyes were the pale blue she had seen only once in her life, 8 months ago, across the back pew of the chapel of Saint Cecile. Hollis Landry, at 15. The third photograph showed a girl, maybe 20, smiling at the camera, standing on the steps of the chapel, with one hand on the railing, wearing a Sunday dress. Cecile. It could only be Cecile. The fourth photograph, Wren held it under the light from the skylight. Her hand began to shake. A man, perhaps 35, in a Sunday suit, white shirt, dark tie, standing on the front steps of the chapel of Sainte Cécile. He was holding a little girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. The little girl wore a white dress. She had 2 long brown braids, with small yellow ribbons tied at the ends. The man's arm was around her shoulders. Both of them were smiling, the kind of smile that knows it is being photographed and does not mind. Wren turned the photograph over, written on the back, in Ezra's slanting hand, Adeline, summer of 1984, Cocodrie, and below that, in smaller letters, as if added later, my goddaughter. Wren sat down on the cabin floor, the photograph still in her hand, the morning sun moving slowly across the table, the whole cabin smelling of cedar and varnish and bayou water, and 40 years of one quiet man's prayer. Outside on the deck, footsteps. Thaddeus. He came in through the open cabin door. He saw her sitting on the floor. He saw the photograph in her hand. He saw her face. He sat down beside her, without a word, the way he had sat that first morning, on the dock, with 2 paper cups of coffee. She turned the photograph so he could see it. Thaddeus looked at the picture for a long time. Then he looked at her. That man in the suit, she said, is not a distant cousin. No, he's a thief. He is. And Ezra. Yes. She lifted her face. She breathed once, slowly. Ezra was my mother's godfather. Thaddeus put his arm around her shoulders, the way her father used to, a long time ago, in a kitchen in Mississippi, before everything had gone quiet. He pulled her against him. He held her there. The 2 of them sitting on the cedar floor of the cabin she had built with her own hands, looking at a photograph from 1984. Yes, child, he said. He was. Father Beaumont opened the cabinet in the back room of the chapel. It was the kind of cabinet that had not been opened often. The hinges complained. A small puff of dust came out. Inside were ledgers, dozens of them. One for each year the chapel had kept records. The bindings were brown leather. The spines were stamped in gold. He pulled down 1977. He set it on the table. He turned the pages slowly, with the patience of a man who had been turning pages like this for 30 years. Wren stood beside him, with Thaddeus behind her, with Hollis Landry in the doorway, leaning on his cane. Father Beaumont stopped on a page in July. He turned the ledger so Wren could see. The page was a list of baptisms, each one a single line. Name, date, officiant, and in the rightmost column, 2 names, the godparents. Wren leaned over the page. She read, Adeline Marie Calloway, July 14th, 1977. In the godparent column, Ezra Joseph Thibodeau. Hollis Landry exhaled, quietly, in the doorway. There it is, he said, in ink. Father Beaumont closed the ledger. He kept his hand flat on the cover, as if he were keeping it shut, or maybe blessing it. It was hard to tell with him. Take photographs of this page, he said, and of the back of the photograph from the boat, and bring me the documents the man in the suit left for you. I have a friend in the diocese office in Houma. She has dealt with people like Hadley Vance before. She will know what to do. Why? Wren said. Her voice was small. Why didn't Ezra ever tell anyone? Father Beaumont thought a long moment. Because some people, he said, when they love a child, do not feel the need to be loud about it. They just love them, and pray for them, and let the love do its own work, wherever it can reach. Hollis came forward. He set one hand on Wren's shoulder, the way her father used to, a long time ago. Honey, he said, Ezra never had a child of his own. After Cecile died, he never let himself have one. But your mama, she was the closest thing. He held her at the font when she was a baby. He held her at her confirmation. He held her when her parents divorced and she was sent down here every summer to live with her grandfather, and later, when she went back up to Mississippi and got married and had you. He kept holding her, just from far away. Wren did not cry. Not yet. The crying was building, but it was not ready. She nodded. Hadley Vance came back on Saturday morning. The black sedan rolled into the gravel lot at 10 o'clock. He stepped out, adjusted his tie, carried his briefcase down the dock with the same polished, unbothered walk. Wren was waiting. She stood at the end of the dock, with her hair pulled back, in a clean shirt. She was barefoot. Behind her stood Thaddeus, Father Beaumont, Hollis, and a thin, sharp-eyed woman from the diocese office in Houma, whose name was Mrs. Suzette Roussel, and who carried in a slim leather folder under her arm copies of the chapel ledger, copies of the photograph, copies of Ezra's will, and a stamped, notarized affidavit from the diocese itself. Hadley Vance saw them. His walk slowed. Just a half step. He recovered. "Miss Calloway," he said, "I see you have brought counsel." "No, sir," Wren said. "I have brought witnesses." Mrs. Roussel stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. In 9 minutes, standing on a dock in southern Louisiana, in the warm October sun, with cypress shadows moving softly across the boards under her feet, she dismantled every piece of paper Hadley Vance had brought. The cousin in Baton Rouge was real, distantly. A second cousin once removed, by a marriage that had been annulled. The documentation was real, but it had been gathered by a firm that had handled, in recent years, 4 other estates of solitary men who had died in southern Louisiana, with no immediate family, and in 3 of those 4 cases, the settlement had been overturned, after distant relatives, hired by Hadley Vance, had been shown to have no legal standing. This case would be the 4th. She handed him her own folder. He looked at it. He did not open it. He looked up at Wren. His smile had gone away. His eyes had gone very tired. "I see," he said. "Have a safe drive back to Baton Rouge," Mrs. Roussel said. It was a long way to come. He turned. He walked back to his sedan. He did not adjust his tie this time. The black car drove out of the gravel lot. The dust hung in the air for a moment after it. Then a breeze came off the bayou and blew it away. Hollis Landry sat down on the dock bench, slowly, both hands on his cane. "Well," he said. "That was satisfying." Wren laughed. It surprised her. The sound came out of her like a hiccup, like she had not known there was a laugh still in there. She laughed for the first time in over a year. That night, Thaddeus came over with a brown paper bag. He set it on the cabin table. He opened it. Inside was a small wooden box, the kind a watchmaker might use, polished walnut, brass hinges. He set it in front of her. "Ezra left this with me," he said. "5 years ago," he said, "if a young person ever bought the boat, and if they ever asked the right questions, and if they ever stayed long enough to be worth knowing, then I should give them this." She looked at the box. "I did not give it to you when you arrived," Thaddeus said, "because I did not know yet. If you would be the one, I was not going to give it to just anyone." She put her hand on the lid. "And now," she said. "Now," Thaddeus said. "I know." He walked out onto the deck. He left her alone. She opened the box. Inside, a small leather-bound notebook, the size of her palm, a journal. The handwriting on the first page she recognized at once. It was Ezra's, but younger, crisper, the letters more upright, as if a younger man had set them down before age had taught his hand to lean. The first entry was dated 1972. It read, "I do not know what to do with the things in my head." Father Beaumont's predecessor, Father Cormier, told me I should write them down, because the things you can write down are the things you can sometimes set down. The things you cannot write down stay inside you and eat. So I am writing. The first thing I want to say, before I write anything else, is that I loved Cécile Boudreau, and I am going to keep loving her until the day I die, and I will not be loving anyone else in that way, not because of any vow I have made, but because the place where that love lived was filled by her, and it cannot be filled by anyone else without pushing her out, and I will not push her out. Wren stopped. She lifted her face. She breathed once. She kept reading. The journal walked her through 40 years, not in order, the way real memory walks, forward, back, sideways. Ezra wrote about Cécile drowning, about finding her body on the third day, about the morning he walked back into the chapel where they were going to marry, and about how he sat in the last pew, on the left, by the side window, and he could not move, and Father Cormier had not asked him to, and he had stayed there until the next morning, when Hollis Landry had come and brought him a sandwich and a cup of coffee, and had sat beside him without saying a word, and had stayed with him until he could stand up. He wrote about leaving Cocodrie, about the years at the sugar refinery in Houma, about the small rented room above a bakery, about the loneliness that was so quiet some nights he forgot it was there. He wrote about the houseboat, about the day he bought it for $400 in 1985, about the first night he slept on it, and about how in the middle of the night he had felt the boat rocking, and he had heard for the first time in 15 years his own heart make a sound, other than its slow, flat beat. He wrote about Adeline. The first entry that mentioned her was in 1976. He wrote, "My oldest friend in this world is named Maurice Calloway. He has been my friend since we were 6 years old. We grew up here in Cocodrie. We fished together. We got drunk for the first time together. We stood up at each other's weddings. He left town in '72 to take a job in Mississippi. Today, he wrote me a letter. He has a daughter. He has named her Adeline. He has asked me to be her godfather. I do not know what to say. I do not have it in me to be a father. I never have. But to be a godfather, that is something. That is a smaller thing. That is something I might be able to do. I will tell him yes." The next entry was 1977. "I held Adeline today at the font. She is 1 year old. She did not cry. She watched the water with her wide eyes and reached for it with both little hands, as if it were something she had been waiting for. Father Cormier laughed and said, 'This one knows where she belongs.' I gave her a silver cross. I had her name engraved on the back. I do not know how to be much in her life from this far away, but she will have the cross, and she will know." And then a later entry, 1984. Adeline came to Cocodrie for the summer. Her parents are divorcing. Maurice asked if she could stay with him and his mother. I have taken her to the chapel 3 Sundays in a row. She sits beside me. She does not say much. She is 8 years old. She is quieter than children should be. I do not know what to do with her, but she likes to draw. She drew a picture today of a boat with a stick figure sailor and a sail the size of a bedsheet. She gave it to me. I have folded it into the back of this journal. Wren stopped reading. She closed the journal carefully, with her finger marking the page. She walked across the cabin to Ezra's old footlocker. She knelt down. She lifted the lid. She moved aside the folded American flag and the empty canvas bag from 1985. At the very bottom of the footlocker, under everything else, was a small folded piece of paper, yellowed, soft at the creases. She had not seen it the first time she had emptied the locker, because it had been pressed flat against the bottom, because she had not been looking for it, because she had been too busy counting money to look for anything else. She unfolded it. A child's drawing of a boat, in crayon. with a stick-figure sailor, and a sail the size of a bedsheet in the bottom right corner, in a child's careful 8-year-old hand. The name, Adeline. Wren put her hand over her mouth. She kept it there for a long time. She had drawn boats like this, as a child, hundreds of them. Her mother had saved them, in a folder, in a kitchen drawer, the one beside the silverware. She had thought it was her own thing, her strange particular pull, coming up out of nowhere, from a flat town in Mississippi where the river was 40 miles away. It had not come up out of nowhere. Her mother had drawn boats first, beside Ezra Thibodeau, on the deck of this same boat, in the summer of 1984. She set the drawing on the cabin table, beside the photograph of her parents from 2007, beside the prayer journal, beside her mother's leather Bible, beside the small wooden cabin box from Thaddeus, a small altar, of everything that had ever loved her. Wren went back to the cabin table. She picked up her mother's Bible. She opened it. To the inside cover, the blank page that came before the title page. She had not looked at this page in 8 years. She had not been ready. She looked at it now, in ink that had faded, but not quite all the way. There was a handwritten inscription. For Adeline, sweetest of the lambs, on the day of your confirmation, may the Lord keep you and bring you back to water when you need it. E.T. Summer of 1990. Wren stared at the initials. E.T. Ezra Thibodeau. The Bible she had kept under her pillow for 8 years. The one her mother had read at the kitchen table every morning of her life. It was his. He had given it to her mother. When her mother was 13 years old, at her confirmation, in the same chapel of Saint Cecile, the little notes in the margins of the pages, the ones written in an older hand than her mother's. That was Ezra's hand. She had been carrying a piece of him with her, for 8 years, without knowing. She closed the Bible. She held it to her chest with both hands. And finally, the crying that had been building since the photograph came. It came. It was a long cry. She did not try to hold it back. The storm came in the second week of November. Tropical storm Cleona had formed off the Yucatan 3 days earlier. By Tuesday, it was a Category 1. By Wednesday morning, it had crossed the Gulf and was tracking northeast, toward the Louisiana coast. Huma was put under a voluntary evacuation Wednesday afternoon. The marina got the order Wednesday night. Thaddeus drove out at 6 in the morning Thursday. He found Wren on her boat. Bare feet, hair tied back, hands on her hips, staring up at the cypress trees over the dock. "Marina's pulling out," he said. "Most folks moved their boats to the trailer lot already." "I know." "You can move the houseboat up too. We can get the winch on her in an hour. She doesn't need to ride this out in the water." Wren did not turn around. She kept looking at the cypresses. "I rebuilt her," she said. "I know. Every joint, every weld, every plank. I know." She turned around. "I am not moving her," she said. "She has not moved from this slip in 40 years. She has been through 12 hurricanes in this slip. She is not going to ride out the 13th in a parking lot." Thaddeus looked at her for a long moment. He did not argue. He had argued with stubborn people before, and he had argued with people who had built something with their own hands, and he had learned that the two were not the same kind of stubborn. The first you could move. The second was wasted breath. "All right," he said. "All right. You'll come up to the shop. While she rides it out, the shop will hold." "No. Wren. I am staying on her. Wren, she rebuilt my heart, Thaddeus. I am not leaving her alone for this." Thaddeus held her eyes. He breathed out. "I am going to argue with you about that for the next 10 minutes. "Okay," he argued. She did not move. He gave up. He helped her tie every line he could find, bow lines, stern lines, spring lines. He doubled them. He tripled them. He brought down 2 truck tires to use as fenders. He climbed onto the cabin roof with her and re-screwed every seam. He stayed until 2 in the afternoon. Then he went home to ride it out with his own family, because Thaddeus had a wife, and a daughter who was 23, and a granddaughter who was 4, and he was needed there. Wren was alone on the houseboat by 3. The first bands of rain came in at 5. The wind picked up at 6. By 8, the inlet had turned into something Wren had never seen before. The cypresses bent sideways. The Spanish moss whipped like long gray hair in a fight. The water had risen 4 feet. It slapped against the steel hull of the boat in heavy, regular thumps, the way a fist knocks on a door. By 10, the wind was at 90 miles an hour. Wren sat on the cabin floor, her back against the new bookshelf, her mother's Bible in her lap, Ezra's prayer journal beside her. The wind shrieked through the dock pilings. The boat bucked against her lines. Things outside cracked. Things outside snapped. Somewhere down the inlet, something large fell into the water with a deep wooden moan. The cabin held. The cedar walls she had built held. The hull she had patched and sanded and painted blue held. She was not afraid. She was very afraid. She was both at once. She held the Bible in her lap, and she said, out loud, into the screaming dark, "You built her. I built her. Hold on." She did not know who she was talking to. She was talking to all of them. She was talking to Ezra. She was talking to her mother. She was talking to her father. She was talking to the small, quiet voice that had begun to live in her chest over the last 8 months, the one she had stopped pretending was not there. She was talking to all of them. The eye passed at 1 in the morning. For 28 minutes the storm went quiet. Wren stepped out onto the deck. The bayou was a mess. Branches floating everywhere. A fishing skiff overturned in the middle of the inlet. The cypress closest to the dock had lost a whole side. The chapel of Saint Cecile across the water. She could not see it clearly. There was no light. But she could see by the moon that briefly opened above her in the storm's eye that the steeple still stood. The cross at the top still leaned a little to the east, still listening. The back half of the storm came in at 1:30. It was angrier than the first. The wind shifted direction. The boat groaned. Wren went back inside. She lay down on the cabin floor with both arms over her head, and she waited. By 5 in the morning, the wind was at 30. By 7, the rain had stopped. By 8, the bayou was still. Wren stepped out onto her deck. Her boat had lost 1 cabin window. The glass had blown in. The new cedar siding on the front had 2 long splits in it. The skylight in the roof was cracked, but not broken. Other than that, she had held. Half the marina had not. 2 boats had sunk in their slips. The dockmaster's office had lost its roof. A trailer in the parking lot had been picked up and dropped on its side. 3 docks were splintered, but Wren's boat had held. She walked down the dock, her bare feet in the wet boards. She walked all the way to the end, where the bayou opened out toward the chapel of Saint Cecile. The chapel was standing. The chapel was standing. She breathed in. She breathed out. She turned to walk back. That was when she saw it. The hull of her boat, where the storm had ripped away a piece of the new cedar siding at the bow. Below the siding, underneath, on the bare steel of the original hull, a small flat metal box, welded to the steel. She had not seen it during the rebuild, because it had been hidden under the siding she had not torn out, because the siding at the bow had been one of the few sections that had still been solid, because she had built over it, without ever looking. The storm had torn the cover off. The storm had shown her. She climbed down onto the hull, with one hand on the dock for balance. She put her hand on the box. The lid was rusted, held by a single brass clasp. She undid the clasp. She lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, two things, a letter and a small wooden cross. She lifted the cross out first. It was the size of her palm, carved by hand, a child's hand. The angles were not perfect. The arms were not quite even, but the wood was smooth, as if it had been held many, many times. Carved into the center, a single letter, A, in careful 8-year-old strokes. Wren turned the cross over in her hand. On the back, in an adult's hand, in small letters that had been added later, for Ezra, who gave me the first one, love your Adeline. Summer, 1984. She closed her fingers around the cross. She climbed back up onto the dock. She sat down. She lifted the letter. She unfolded it. The handwriting was Cecile's. She knew it without being told, because the looping G's matched the writing on the back of the chapel photograph, because the date at the top was March 14, 1970, 2 weeks before Cecile drowned. The letter was short. My Ezra. I cannot wait 2 more weeks. I am writing this letter because I know I will be too nervous to say it right at the wedding, so I am putting it down now, while the lamp is good, while the night is quiet. You have made me into someone I did not know I could be. Before I met you, I was just a girl who could sing. After I met you, I was a woman who could love. I do not know how you did that. I do not need to know if anything ever happens to me before we get to grow old together, which I do not think will happen, because Father Cormier prays for our long life every Sunday. But if it ever did, I want you to keep going. I want you to find a child somewhere and love that child for both of us, because we wanted children, and we will have them, either in this world or in the next one, or in someone else's family, where they need to be loved. Promise me. Yours always, Cecile. Wren read the letter twice. She set it down on the dock. She held the small wooden cross in her right hand, and then, with her left hand, she reached inside her shirt, and she lifted out the silver cross her mother had worn, the one Adeline had taken off the day before her aneurysm, the one that had been put back around Wren's neck on the day of the funeral, the one Wren had not taken off in 8 years. The 2 crosses lay together in her palm. The silver one her mother had worn since she was a baby, the small wooden one her mother had carved at 8 years old, for Ezra, to thank him for the silver one he had given her at her baptism. Wren turned the silver cross over. On the back, so small she had never thought to look, there was an engraving. Adeline, 1977. She stared at it. 2 crosses, from the same hand, across 7 years, from a young man in Cocodrie to an infant goddaughter who would become her mother, who would in turn give it, on her deathbed, to her daughter, who had carried it without knowing where it had come from. She did not stand up for a long time. She sat on the wet dock, with the bayou flat and tired and bright around her, with the morning sun coming up behind the chapel of Sainte Cécile, and the small white shape of the building visible now across the inlet, through the storm-broken cypresses. She felt 3 people standing behind her, not in any way you could photograph, but standing. The cleanup took 2 weeks. She helped. She fixed her own cabin window. She replaced the cracked skylight. She helped Thaddeus rebuild his shop porch. She helped Joubert salvage what he could of his skiff. She helped Odile drag soaked tablecloths and curtains out of her flooded kitchen and hang them on a line behind the building. The community thanked her, not in big speeches, in small things. A pie, a jar of fig preserves, a new pair of work gloves, a clean towel left rolled up on her dock. She had stopped being the new girl somewhere during the storm. She was just Wren now, the girl who had held. That night, with everything quiet, with the cabin window patched, with the cross in her pocket, with her mother's Bible in her lap, with Ezra's prayer journal and his early journal stacked on the cabin table beside her. She finally opened the second envelope, the one her father had given her, the one he had written. Open only when you find your water. She had found her water. She had been on it for 9 months. She broke the seal. She unfolded the page. 3 pages this time, in her father's slanting handwriting. The way he had written checks. The way he had labeled boxes in the garage. The way he had once long ago written her name on lunchroom paper bags. Wren, you found it. I knew you would. I knew the day you took that job in Jackson at the marine store. I knew the day you brought home that boat parts catalog and started reading it at the dinner table. I knew the night I came in from work and found you crying over a sketchbook because you had drawn a sailboat wrong. I knew. Your mother told me everything. About Ezra, about Cocodrie, about her summers down there, about the chapel, about the cross he gave her, about the Bible he gave her, about the way he prayed for her every morning. She told me all of it, before we got married, before we had you. She did not keep anything back. She said, if we are going to have children, they will need to know where they came from, or at least one of us will, and it will have to be you. Silas. Because I might not always be the one to tell them. She knew, I think. Some part of her always knew that she was not going to be the one to take you back down there. She had a feeling she would not live that long. I do not know how she knew. Some women just do. She made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I would take you to Cocodrie when you were old enough. I would let you meet Ezra. I would let the circle close. She made me promise. Wren, I broke that promise. I am sorry. I am so sorry. After we lost her, I could not. I could not go back to anywhere she had been. I could not even look at the kitchen where she had folded laundry on a Wednesday afternoon. I could not have gone to Cocodrie. I could not have looked Ezra in the face and told him she was gone. I could not have done any of it. I broke my promise to her, and I have been carrying that broken promise for 8 years. But I want you to know something. Every month, for 8 years, I have put $5 or $10 into your coffee can while you were sleeping. I did the math. Once. Of what you should have been able to save from the marine store after bus fare, and the shoes you bought for school, and the lunch you sometimes packed for yourself when I forgot. The number in your can was always more than the math. By $30 or $40 a month, I thought. If I could not take you to her water, I would help you get there yourself, when you were ready. I am sorry I did it the coward's way. I am sorry I could not tell you with my voice while I was alive. I am sorry for the 8 years of silence. You are going to find Ezra, or you have already. He is going to be a good man. Your mother loved him. He loved her. He is going to love you too. He has been loving you. Your mother told me every morning since you were born. She made him promise that too. The promise I broke. He kept. Find him. Tell him I am sorry. Tell him I tried. I love you, child. I have loved you every day, even on the days I could not show it. Daddy. Wren read the letter twice. She did not cry the way she had cried at the photograph. She just sat very still. She thought about her father putting $5 into a Folgers coffee can in the back of her closet while she slept, once a month, for 96 months. $5, $10. Once a $1 bill folded inside a 5. $480 she calculated almost without thinking. Maybe 500. The cost of a houseboat, times 50. The smallest love. Repeated. She lifted her face to the small new skylight her own hands had put into the cabin roof. She breathed. Daddy, she said softly. I found him. I'm sorry. I found him, Daddy. Hollis showed me. The Bible. The cross. The boat. The chapel. Father Beaumont opened the ledger. He kept your promise for you. He did. He kept it the whole time. she breathed. And I forgive you. Daddy, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. She set the letter on the cabin table. She got up. She walked out onto the deck. The bayou was glass still. She stood there a long time. In the spring, she went into Houma. She walked into the bank. She asked for Mrs. Therese Camille, the woman who had counted Ezra's money with her 11 months earlier. They sat down at a small table. Wren told her what she wanted to do. She wanted to take $22,000 from her account. She wanted to open a separate fund. She wanted it administered through the diocese in Houma, with Father Beaumont as one signatory, Mrs. Camille as another, Mrs. Roussel as a third. She wanted to call it the Adeline Fund. It would be a small scholarship, not a big one, $5,000 a year, awarded to one girl, each spring, from a small inland town in Mississippi, or Alabama, or Louisiana, a girl who had no family, or who had lost most of one, a girl who wanted to learn a trade, anywhere along the water, sailmaking, marine engineering, boat building, fish camp management, lighthouse keeping if she could find such a thing. Wren did not mind what. She wanted the only requirement to be this. The girl had to have drawn a boat, as a child, and kept the drawing. Mrs. Camille listened. She wrote it all down, when Wren was done. Mrs. Camille put down her pen. Adeline was a beautiful name, she said. Yours, my mother. Mrs. Camille nodded slowly. It will be done, she said. Father Beaumont will love this. Mrs. Roussel will sharpen her pencil. I will draw up the paperwork. The first scholarship can be awarded next spring. Will you sit on the selection board? Yes, ma'am. Of course you will. She extended her hand across the table. Welcome to Houma, Miss Calloway. Thank you, Wren said. The first scholarship was awarded the following May. A girl named Charity Watley, from a town in northern Mississippi, who was 16, whose mother had died of cancer when she was 9, whose father had not been a father in any useful way for some time. In the application packet, the girl had submitted, as required, a drawing she had made of a boat when she was 7 years old, in crayon, with a stick figure sailor and a sail the size of a bedsheet. Wren read the application 3 times. When she got to that drawing, she set the packet down on her cabin table, and she put both her hands over her mouth, and she nodded, quietly, with tears running down both sides of her face. She wrote on the top of the packet, yes, her, on a Sunday morning in late June, 2.5 years after she had stepped off a bus in Houma with $1,118 and a Bible wrapped in a t-shirt. Wren sat on the deck of her houseboat. The hull was deep midnight blue. The cabin smelled of cedar. The skylight let down a column of sun directly onto her table. On the table, open to the 7th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, lay her mother's Bible, with the inscription on the inside cover, For Adeline, Sweetest of the Lambs, E.T., Summer of 1990. Inside the Bible, as a bookmark, a child's crayon drawing of a boat. Beside the Bible, Wren's coffee can, still with $1,118 inside, untouched. She had decided, a long time before, that she would never spend that money. It was not for spending, it was for remembering. Around her neck, 2 crosses on one chain, a silver one. From Ezra to Adeline, 1977. A small wooden one. From Adeline to Ezra, 1984. Across the inlet. The bell of the chapel of Sainte Cécile rang once, then twice, then 3 times. A heron lifted from the shallows, slow, wide-winged, white against the bright morning. She flew once across the water, toward the chapel, and then she was gone. Wren stood up. She closed the Bible. She picked up the small wooden cane Hollis Landry had given her 2 months earlier, not because she needed a cane, but because Hollis had decided at 83 that he was going to start walking with 2 canes from now on, and he wanted his old one to go to someone who would carry it well. She stepped off the boat. She walked down the dock. The chapel bell rang a 4th time, a 5th, calling everyone in. Wren walked toward it, across the dock, across the gravel path, up the slight rise, up the painted steps, through the white wooden doors, inside. Father Beaumont nodded at her from the altar. Hollis Landry was already in his pew, with his other cane. He turned and gave her his soft, tired smile. She slid in beside him. Last pew, on the left, by the side window, where Ezra had sat, for 40 years. The window looked out across the inlet, toward a small midnight blue houseboat, tied at a wooden dock, where the sun was now full on the water. Hollis looked at her. He patted her hand once. She did not need to be told. She was where she was supposed to be. The hymn began, and Wren Calloway, aged 21 and a half, sweetest of the lambs, of one woman who was gone, and one man who was gone, and one father who was gone, and one godfather who was gone, the girl who had once spent her last $10 on a rusted houseboat, sang, quietly, beside an old man in a Sunday tie, in a small chapel by a slow southern water, where she had at long last come home. The end. If this story moved you, if you sat with it for these last few hours, if something in your own heart shifted even a little, then take a moment. Subscribe to the channel so the next quiet story finds you, and in the comments tell us about a small kindness that has carried you, about a person who prayed for you when you did not know it, about a piece of water somewhere that called you home. We read every one, and we will see you on the next one.